Hey guys, so Heidi here. I know you're used to seeing tutorials on my channel, which is why I wanted to introduce you to this new content. It's the Successful Fashion Designer podcast, and you'll see it here on the YouTube channel every Monday. If you want to subscribe in iTunes, you can click the link on the video that comes up right now. Otherwise, I wanted to make sure to give you all my amazing content in one spot right here on YouTube. Sound good? Great. Now on to the interview. Hey everybody, this is Heidi, and you're listening to the Successful Fashion Designer podcast. We all know that the fashion industry is brutally competitive and it takes loads of hard work to get ahead. The problem is that everyone's secretive and tight-lipped about their ways. After working as a designer and educator for over a decade, I wanted to help break down those barriers and bring you valuable knowledge from industry experts, and this show is exactly where you'll find that. Whether you're trying to break into the fashion world, make yourself more marketable, launch your own label, or become a successful freelancer, we'll help you get ahead in the cutthroat fashion industry. This is episode 4 of the Successful Fashion Designer podcast, and today I'm chatting with Marissa Borelli, who didn't even discover fashion as a career option until her junior year in college when she fell in love with the industry. She ditched UCLA, moved to New York City, and enrolled in Parsons, all without the support of her parents. Marissa's been working as a designer for over 10 years for brands like Lululemon and Athleta. She had her own line of scarves with distribution to over 60 retail outlets internationally, and she now freelances full-time from the comfort of her home while being a twin mom to 2 little boys. Marissa shares exactly how she pitches new clients, prices her projects to make a fair wage, and successfully does that scary networking thing to get more work. Before we jump into the interview, I want to let you know that I've prepared something extra special for you for this episode. Marissa gave us so much great advice and tricks to land freelance work that I created a step-by-step checklist plus swipe copy email templates you can use to get more work. You can find this free resource on the Successful Fashion Designer Network at sfdnetwork.com/download4. That's download and the number 4. To access the show notes for today's episode, visit sfdnetwork.com/4. Now on to the interview with Marissa. Okay, so why don't we first start out, tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got started working in fashion.
Yeah, so my name is Marissa, and I've been designing now for 10 years, but I started, I went to UCLA to play volleyball, and then I studied abroad. I actually quit volleyball because they weren't going to let me study abroad, and I'm obsessed with traveling. So when I was studying in Italy, I took a fashion class, and then ever since then, I've been wanting to do it. So, but what I did was like marry my 2 loves. Like I design activewear. So I get to work in fashion, but then I also get to work in sports. And so those are my 2 favorite things. And after UCLA, I went to Parsons in New York City. And that was such a blast and so hard. It was very, that program was tough. But New York City, is an awesome spot to live in and so inspiring. And, you're with students from all over the world. And now my friends, they still work all over the world. But, yeah. And then after that, I moved back to Los Angeles and started working for like a startup company. So I was their only employee. And they brought me on to design, but then I ended up doing like sales and marketing and website design and, production. And, so yeah, that was a good, learning experience. Yeah.
So had you ever really thought about fashion before you like randomly wound up taking this course when you were abroad?
No, not to do for work. I always loved fashion, but I never thought that was going to be my career. Because at UCLA, we don't have a fashion program. I think they have like a costume design, maybe like minor, but they don't have, a fashion program. So it wasn't really an option. And I went to UCLA to play volleyball. Like that was the main reason why I went there. Yeah. And then I kind of shifted gears once I quit, and then I was able to, study Italian and fashion and changed what I wanted to do.
How far into your education was that like discovery of fashion?
Junior year.
Okay. So you were like pretty well invested already in that. Then did you feel like, what was that transition like? Were you scared to be like, I'm going to not do this and I'm going to pursue this other thing that's like kind of a 180? Or, I mean, how did that transition feel?
I was super excited about it. My parents were not happy. My dad was like, what are you doing? And like when they moved me out to New York City, they came out there for like a few days to help me try to find an apartment. And it's such a nightmare trying to find a place in New York. So my parents just left me and I lived in a hostel for the first like 2 weeks of school because I couldn't find a place. But yeah, so they weren't super supportive.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It didn't really matter to me. Like I knew what I wanted to do.
And so this is actually really interesting because I experienced almost the exact same thing. I went to school for business and then I was like, I can't do this. This is horrible. And I discovered graphic design and I like pitched it to my mom and dad and they were like, what? You're going to be studying art? And they were really, I mean, at the end of the day, they're your parents, so they're like there for you, but they were not into it. And I really had to sell them on it. And even once I sold them on it, they were not really that excited. And it wasn't until years later that I actually got success in that industry and then ultimately wound up turning that into a career in fashion that they were like, okay, yeah, this is something, we get it. So did you, like after you were able to show them, or actually, let me rewind on that question, because before we even get to that, like, what were they not supportive of? Because this is something I've heard from a lot of other people in the industry too.
Yeah. My dad wanted me to study business too. His dad started a real estate company. And so then my dad took it over when he was 22. So I don't know if that he was thinking like, I was just going to come home and work for the family business. But, I didn't come home for 12 years. California is great and Northern California is beautiful. But, I wanted to move around and experience new things. So I think they weren't super happy about that. Sending me to UCLA, they were like, oh, our daughter's going to go to this awesome school and go get a job right after. And then it's like, oh no, now I'm going to move to New York and study fashion. He's like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
But yeah, and they didn't come visit me. Like it was not looking back. Yeah, they weren't super supportive, I guess. But I don't know. My parents are also kind of tough love parenting. When I was studying abroad, I was in Prague and I got everything stolen. My friends and I, we got our passports, our credit cards, our cell phone, our IDs, everything stolen. And we called, like each one of us called our parents. And my parents, or my dad just said, figure it out, and hung up the phone on me.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think they just kind of let me do what I want.
But at the end of the day, you wanted to pursue this so badly, and you just said, you know what, this is what I'm going to do with or without your support. Like, I want this.
Right.
And that's kind of, you had to take reins of your own life. Yeah,
because my boyfriend at the time wasn't happy either.
Oh.
So, but then, in New York City, it's so easy to meet people.
Yeah.
Everybody moves there to do their dream. And whether that's, finance or art or design or it could dance, it could be anything. But so everyone's there without any family, like without any support system. So the people that I met my first week at school, I'm still really good friends with now.
So that turned into your support system.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Okay, so you were out there for many years, and you said like your first real job in the industry was back on the West Coast working for a startup. How'd you get your foot in the door with them?
So actually, I know the girl from growing up. Her name's Carrie Walsh. She plays beach volleyball in the Olympics.
Okay.
She wanted to start a clothing line. And, she obviously is very good at volleyball, but she hadn't done anything in fashion. So she heard that I was graduating school and moving back to LA, and that's where she's in. She's in LA. So they were like, oh, do you want to come work for us in design? And I was like, yeah, that sounds awesome. But then I ended up being in charge of, production and sales and, doing trunk shows and pop-up shops and things like that. So it was a good, throw yourself in learning experience. But I mean, that's just startups. So I think that's probably why I still like freelancing, because you have your hands in lots of different areas. It's not CAD all day, every day.
Mm-hmm. So speaking of freelance, you're a freelance designer and have worked with some really big names: Lululemon, Athleta, Ralph Lauren, Swiss Army, Victorinox. And so you went from this startup, like how did you start branching into some of these really big companies? Because some of those opportunities, that could be hard to get your foot in the door. Did you know people, or like what did you do to land some of those gigs?
Yeah. So basically, what I would suggest for people is networking is huge, and not necessarily like, let me go to a trade show and meet people. It's more, keeping in touch with all your contacts from before, mm-hmm. because you never know where they're going to end up later. So I actually worked for Ralph Lauren back when I was at Parsons. And because I was so niche, I wanted to do activewear. At Parsons, no one wanted to design activewear. Mm. So when I went to there was a Ralph Lauren table, like, oh, come work for us. And, there weren't many people wanting to do golf. Like I went into women's golf. And then I was doing like the women's tennis, and then I was working on Wimbledon. So you have to just be willing. I like riches in the niches. All that saying, I totally believe that. Back when I started freelancing, and I started I called myself an active lifestyle consultant, and I started that about 6 years ago. And it was right after I worked for Lululemon. Sorry, let me back up. And at Parsons, I was working at Ralph Lauren and Swiss Army, and the head designer at Swiss Army came from Ralph Lauren. So once he saw on my resume that I'd worked at Ralph Lauren, he's like, oh, I work the same way. Mm. We set up our concept board first, and then we figure out our trims, and then we meet with the designers and we give them like the vibe, and then they come up with the designs, and then we do a presentation. Like Ralph Lauren is very, very structured. It's insane. And everything's sketched out and illustrated, and the CAD comes way later. So that's how I landed that job, so they kind of trickle down off each other.
Yeah.
And then after K Active, which was Carrie Walsh's line, the startup that I worked at first, then I went to Lululemon because I was wanting to do something with like a bigger company. So I did actually visual merchandising for them. And then I was assistant manager at a store. So I worked the corporate side. And when they wanted me to move up to Vancouver, I went up and interviewed in Vancouver for a design job because they only take you in Vancouver for design. Oh. My boyfriend at the time, he proposed. So the timing didn't work out. And they weren't going to give both of us a working visa. So instead of staying in the stores, which I didn't want to do, I wanted to design, I started freelancing. So then I left Lululemon, and then I was freelancing, and my first freelance job was working for TJ Maxx and Marshalls. And I think I found that one maybe off of Craigslist.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And it's not like he advertised it as it was Green Apple Active. And so that brand's still around, but he used to do So Sporty and Green Apple at TJ Maxx and Marshalls. Mm-hmm. So they were hiring a designer just to do the TJ Maxx and Marshalls brand. So I had no idea what I was interviewing for. I go in, and he's like, oh, obviously I have to have a portfolio and your resume, but I think it's more personality, how well can you get along with people? Freelancing, we were freelancing out of his house. He set up he had a second house. And so he had it set up as a little office. So, can you work in these kind of strange working environments? Can you work from home? Or do you need more structure? My husband needs more of a structured office, whereas I can work from Mexico or from Taiwan, or I can kind of work from wherever. But yeah. And then after that, I'm trying to think where I went next. Oh, I started my scarf line.
Oh, yeah. I want to hear about that.
Yeah. So I was freelancing and I was doing, Green Apple. And then I was also doing stuff for Race Ready. I don't know if you've seen them, but they're a super niche running brand. All they did was running shorts. And they had these patented crazy 5 pockets on the back. But I was like, oh, this is awesome. So I started working for them. And I launched my scarf line at the same time. When I was working at Lululemon, I always wanted something to like cool me down after our workouts. Cause at Lululemon, you work out like 3 times a day at all the different studios. And, so I wanted something that was really soft. I love Lululemon's clothes, but they don't have, it's very synthetic. It's not a ton of cotton and bamboo. So I was looking for something, that you just like drape over yourself. And so I started the scarf line, and I called it a Borelli scarf. And, I sourced all the fabric, and I got it into about 60 retail outlets, about in 5 different countries.
Wow.
And yeah, so that was a really good learning experience too. I did that over 4 years. But yeah, and a lot of those stores came from the contacts I made at Lululemon or the ones I made at K-Active. Okay. So if you stay in the same realm, like the same, not the same industry, but the same like niche of fashion, then all those contacts you've made before, as long as you're a good person and you're nice to everybody, they want to help you out. So I would just do a trunk show at some, at a Pilates studio, or maybe get into a yoga studio. They would start buying it wholesale. But yeah, so they've all like built upon each other.
Okay, you've said so many things that are that I want to touch on. Part of them were parts of my questions that I already had outlined. So let me just go through kind of one by one. The first one is that you made the comment earlier, and I literally have this on my sheet, of that your personality and like that you can just kind of like mesh with the group, and you can work in this odd environment if it's like out of someone's house or like on the road or wherever it be. And so in one of your bios, you had a testimonial, and it says, her creativity with product and her fun personality was what made her stand out and why I would work with her again. And so it's like being a good designer is really key, but people also have to like you.
Right.
And so, I mean, part of that is just your personality at the end of the day. We can't all like each other. But like, are there any things you feel like you've just done to make yourself easy to work with, and to get asked back, or to, 2 years later go out to that buyer who you knew from Lululemon and say, hey, I just launched my own label, and it's not competitive to Lulu, it's complementary. Like, here's what I'm doing, and she still remembers you and she still likes you. I mean, have you really done anything strategic to maintain those relationships and be quote unquote easy to work with and have a fun personality?
There's a few things, and sometimes people think this is a bad thing, but saying yes to everything. When you're at a job, this is one of my pet peeves when you ask someone to do something like, oh, that's not in my job description, or oh, that's not my responsibility. I think that's what you learn working for startups is it's everyone's responsibility. And so you need to pick up the slack sometimes. But people want to hire you again if you can be dynamic and, take on different pieces of the project without being prepped maybe beforehand. But I mean, yeah, being nice, that's kind of easy to do. But, being like more of a team player, and maybe that comes from sports, like you're not always going to be the lead designer. You're not always going to be like the main sales rep, or, you're not always going to get your name on everything. So yeah, I think those are like my top things that's why people have asked me to work for them again. Cause I still get reached out, like brands still will reach out to me from the past.
Yeah, so with opportunities.
Yeah. Yeah. Or like, oh, what are you thinking about this? Or I have this idea, maybe like bounce ideas off each other, things like that. Yeah.
And what about along kind of those same lines? Because I know I've worked with third-party vendors in various aspects of my work who I ask them to do something and they're like, oh, that it can't be done, or we can't do that. Like it's like a hard no. And instead of it kind of goes in line with what you said of just say yes. It's like, you know what? Let me take a little bit of time to dive into that and see what I can figure out for you, and I'll get back to you in a day or a week or whatever appropriate timeline it may be. But it kind of goes hand in hand with that whole saying yes thing, right?
Right. Yeah. Like there's always a way.
Right.
Or there's always another factory. Like I run into that a lot with my clients now is, some of my clients are big, some of them are small. So the smaller ones, they can't meet the minimums. But, we just keep asking. We look at different countries. We look at different states. Like in the U.S. now, there's lots of places now to manufacture here. But yeah, I do not take no really for an answer ever.
Okay, so this leads me. I did have a question about sourcing because, like you said, you work globally, all around the world, as well as stateside and local. So, what are some of the really big challenges that you see brands facing with sourcing, whether they're startup or established?
Well, it's funny. Even if you're an established brand, you might be launching a new product, so they may have a ton, maybe in accessories, a ton of different styles and accessories. But when you're launching apparel, you're not going to order a big amount. Even if you already have thousands of stores, the buyer is still going to want to test out your product. So I think they all kind of run into the same problem is that fine balance of meeting the minimums of fabric and cut and sew, or maybe it's seamless. Like I'm working on a seamless project right now too. And also like figuring out how are you going to sell it, right? Like you don't want to be sitting on inventory, but you also don't want to pay a ton to actually manufacture it. So it's constantly trying to strike that balance of, all right, do you have a following yet? Do you have stores yet? If not, maybe, do pay the higher amount, to get the surcharges, for a smaller round of production. But I think, when they're all kind of starting out, or if it's, it's usually like with freelancing, you're usually brought on to test something new. If it's already in-house, or like if it's already like a well-known piece of their brand, they're just going to use someone in-house. But usually when freelancers are brought on, it's like, okay, let's test, women's. Like we're doing really well in men's, let's test like a small capsule in women's. Or we've been doing really well in accessories, like let's do apparel. So it's really, getting to know their customer too, and what their customer would actually want to wear with whatever they're already wearing of theirs. So.
Okay. You're doing a phenomenal job of leading me into each of my questions. This is amazing because you mentioned there, it's like about getting to know the customer and what they want to wear in conjunction with maybe that other item that they're already wearing from that brand. And so one of the lines on your bio says, who are we designing for? Where is she running? Where is he spinning? What's in their green smoothie? And these are really specific questions. And I love this though, because there's this whole concept of defining an avatar, for who is your customer. And, so I love how specific you are with these questions. And I find that these are things to really overlook and instead just let your own aesthetic drive the design, which is important. You have your vision, you have your own aesthetic as a designer, but that's only part of the puzzle. You really have to work towards designing for what the end customer wants and what she or he is going to wear. And so I'd love to hear a little bit about your research process when kind of discovering this person and figuring out exactly who they are and is this going to work for them or isn't it going to work for them. And I think this is great insight. I mean, for people who are just getting started out, because it's something I see with startup designers is that they have this idea and it's just their own vision and they can get kind of stuck in just what they want. And how do you take that and marry it with what the market wants, and how do you even define who your market is? Who is that person? What's in their green smoothie?
Right. Yeah. So usually, well, this is also the reason why I've stayed in activewear too, is because I love working out. So I may not play all the sports, but I understand like how uncomfortable you can get when you're running in something that, or you're running like a half marathon in something that's soaking wet, or like where it's going to chafe. I've done almost all the sports. Like I used to do triathlons and stand-up paddleboarding all before I became a twin mom, because you can't really do those with twins. But I always have my clients fill out a 2-page questionnaire on kind of them defining their customer. And then I'll research what they give me, like what age, where is she going? Is this a Pilates or a yoga brand, or are we running? Mm-hmm. And then I'll try to actually put myself in those areas. So then I'll go to a Pilates class or go to a yoga class or run a race. Now my races are a lot smaller. They're 3 to 5 miles rather than half marathons, but you can still see what everybody's wearing. Mm-hmm. And what the daughter, a lot of moms and daughters run together. It's what's the mom wearing versus what's the daughter wearing? Mm-hmm. Figuring out the trends, because your client is also looking at you as an expert. What's cool right now? What are the trends? What is a buyer looking for? I get that question a lot. So it's really dialing down who he or she is, and then building a collection around that. But always keeping in mind, what does the client actually want? What colors, what fabric. Sometimes they're very hands-on and sometimes they're very hands-off. So you'll figure that out pretty quickly. But some of them need more guidance than others. But yeah, I always try to have them define their customer at the very beginning and then help them hone that down. But at least I get, little pieces of, who they already are going after, who's their target customer.
Yeah.
So.
And then you literally put yourself in their shoes and go to those events, those classes, and look around.
Yeah. Or if I can't, I just had a football client in Nebraska and Florida, and I couldn't fly out there and just see this whole high school crazy football that they're doing now. But it's not like what you play at school. It's more of a club sport. But so I went to Dick's Sporting Goods, and walked around, and it's okay, well, what are the other brands doing? Where do they need compression? Where do they need more padding? What is this padding? How can we make it better? But yeah, so it changes every project. So you can't always actually do the sport, but yeah, just always asking the client. And then I do check out the competitors, see actually how they're doing it, the construction. But then I also always read the reviews online. So say if Nike maybe has the top compression short, well, then I read all the reviews and it's what's negative, what's positive, how can we make it better?
And there's a lot of your market research kind of done for you, because those people are typically pretty brutally honest about what they don't like.
Yeah. And then you can see what size they are, how old are they?
Yeah.
Things like that. Usually put that on there. So.
And then you mentioned the buyer too. So I just want to touch on this for a minute, because a lot of the brands that I work with, we work pretty closely with the sales team, because those are the people that are in front of the buyers day in, day out, and that get that feedback. So how have you gone about getting inside the buyer's head?
That's been more from experience. So, when I was selling my scarves, the Borelli scarves, what were the questions I was getting for the buyer? I did a lot of trunk shows and pop-up stores, and I had visual merchandising experience from Lululemon. So I understand how the buyer wants it to look in the store. They want to make sure that it goes with the other pieces that they have in the store. So it's pointing that out to the buyer, rather than just here's my line sheet. It's walking them through it. Where would you even see it in the store? Is it going on a waterfall hanger? Is it being hung up on the wall? Or are you just actually merchandising it on the shirt on the hanger? Because mine was a scarf. But It's thinking about all those things. So you constantly have to be watching like what colors, are good for 2017 or 2018. Cause you need to make sure that it's actually going to like look cohesive in the store.
Right.
So
if neons are really big or like it's more a dusty palette, pastels, and then you come in with this like fluorescent thing, it's like, that's not going to look good. Even in the corner of the store, it's going to stand out.
Right. Because the buyer, she wants to make sure everything's sold, so you have to like constantly point out what are the key features, what makes it different. That, and a lot of that was from Lululemon. We were always like dialing that down with the customers, like this is what makes it so awesome, or this is why I love wearing it, showing it that way.
Yeah. Okay, so coming back then to your own brand, you just said that you did that for about 4 years, and it sounds like it was a pretty good success. You were in 60 outlets internationally.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it was good. It's just when you have little ones, like, so I had twins. So a twin pregnancy isn't super easy. So I couldn't be traveling as much, be on my feet as much as I was before. When you have your own brand, it's a lot of work, and you don't know how much money you're going to be making. Like each month, it's a little tricky to tell. So when you have two little ones at home, it's tough to like, oh, let me just hire a babysitter, even though I don't know what I'm going to be making next month. And I took time off to actually, have the kids. So you can't just bounce back right away. Or actually, funny story, my water broke as I was cutting fabric on the floor.
Oh.
Yeah. So, because when it's your own brand, there's no turn off switch.
No.
And I think that's kind of what I needed when I became a mom. The twins was kind of overwhelming.
So is that when you kind of said, you know what, I got to put this on hold and focus on my family and then and freelance?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because then I can take on projects when I want to. And some months are busy, and then some months oh, let's go on vacation this month. Okay, I'm not going to work as much.
Yeah.
And like right now, my little son, oh my goodness, he broke his leg last week.
I saw the picture.
Yes, it's so sad. So, but now, mommy needs to take care of him more.
Yeah.
Whereas if I was in-house, I don't know what we would do.
Yeah.
So my husband, commutes. And so, yeah, I think it's a good, freelancing is a good job, if you want to travel or if you want to take more time off, or you just want the flexibility. Really, it's more flexible than it is being in-house. So.
Okay, and I want to talk about that. Before we get to that, I want to just step back to your own collection really quickly, because I just have two things I want to touch on. Obviously, you had your kids, and that's a huge life change. And for you personally, that was sounds like the biggest reason you said, okay, I'm going to shelve this for now, maybe forever, but at least for now. Outside of that, what was like the biggest challenge you faced with your own line?
I think it was trying to figure out what to focus on when you're creative and then you start your own brand, or what I did, I tended to focus on more of the creative side of it, right? So picking out the colors, designing the website, shooting the collection, like sourcing the fabric, things like that, rather than pushing sales more or like tracking exactly what sold when. So I know for next season, like what to order. Mm-hmm. Like it's better for inventory. Like I hated doing inventory. I hated doing shipping. Even sales is, it's tough. Like every 10 stores you call, you'll probably get one. So it can get a little frustrating, and, the creative side of it was much more fun. So yes, I did get into 60 retail outlets, but I probably should have been in more, I should have spent more time doing that. That was probably the biggest challenge was, you're by yourself. So, I had like a few interns and like I had some part-time people helping me when I was super busy, but you don't have anybody telling you like, oh, maybe focus here. Like this part of the business is dropping down, like maybe you need to spend more time here. You have to make it up as you go. So I try to, I lead for all my clients, I give them this 2-hour call or a meeting, if they are close enough to me, but I call it the apparel startup boot camp. And we do a 0 to 6 month plan for them and all the things that they should do. And once a week you have a task. And by the end, then you're able to launch it. So I think I needed more of a roadmap where I just kind of went into it let me try my own line.
And 1 week you're I just feel like doing this. And the next week you just, I don't know, I'll focus on this. And you're just all over the place.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I'm not a super structured person. So, yeah.
So what advice would you give to other people who want to launch their own label? What would be one thing you could say to them that they could walk away from this interview and say, okay, that's something I'm going to focus on doing, and that's going to help me get to success?
Yeah, I would stay at your day job for a while until you get it launched. I quit my job and then started doing the brand. So there's a good 6 months basically, of time you're not going to get paid. Mm-hmm. You can't even sell your product. So that's 6 months of, going through your savings or, I don't know, crashing on your friend's couch, whatever you do. But if you were working, or at least part-time working, just keeping some sort of income, then you don't have to worry about that. Because at the beginning, it's really just getting the word out there of your brand. Unless you already have a huge following, which I didn't. Nobody knew about me. But so it took a little while, I think first year sales, I did that in 1 month my next year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it goes pretty quick if you work your little butt off. But but that first 6 months, year, that's tough.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I would stay. My husband just asked me that. What would you change about your career? Yeah. And I was I would still launch my line, but I would have stayed freelancing, or I would have stayed at Lululemon, or have stayed wherever, because then you're still just making those contacts. I've always stuck in the same industry, so it would have been helpful.
And you would have just had to figure out a way to, because, let's say if I wanted to be a startup designer, then I would come back with, well, then I get home from work after I've worked 40 hours and I'm so tired. But I think on some level, you just got to figure it out. You got to find the time, and I hate to say this, I sound like an old lady nag, but I'm turn off the TV, turn off Facebook, and spend 2 hours a night working on your own thing. And I think that there are people out there that do it. And if you're passionate and driven enough, then you'll figure it out.
Totally. Or if you become a mom, people are listening to their moms. Oh my gosh. You think you don't have enough time, and then you become a parent and you're like, oh my God, what was I doing my whole life before this? Because you have zero free time once you're a parent.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can find the time. Yeah. 2 hours, your weekends. If you really want to launch it, if you really want to do it, you can figure it out.
Figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah. Wake up early. I'm not an early person.
No, me either. I'd rather stay up till 2 a.m.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I used to do when I first had the boys. I started freelancing again when they were 3 months old, and I worked at night.
Yeah.
And my first client was in London, so it worked out perfect.
You were working and they were just starting their day.
Yeah. So it really worked well. I work well with Australia, London, because I work a lot at night. Not anymore. Now they're in preschool, but yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then back onto the freelancing thing, because this is another really interesting space in the industry, and a lot of people I've heard say things like they're so scared about freelancing. You never know where your next job or your next paycheck is going to come from. And yes, you get this great lifestyle, but the two biggest things, and I'd love to get your insights on both of these, is the security of it, where's my next gig coming from, and how to price, how to know if I'm charging too much, how to know if I'm not charging enough, how to get a fair wage, basically bottom line. So you can tackle each of those in whatever order you like.
Yeah. Okay. Let's do how to price, because that was the last one you just said.
Okay.
I remember my CPA, when I first started freelancing, she was like, you need to at least be making $60 an hour. And I was like, why? Like coming from Lululemon where we didn't make that much money per hour. And she's like, because you have all your taxes to pay. Like you have to pay your self-employment tax and, all the other taxes. Like I just filed mine and wanted to cry. But yeah, I think you need to figure out like what's your base. Figure out all the costs of running your business, whether you're incorporated or an LLC. I'm sure it depends on what state you're in, but figure out the bottom and then maybe like tack on more, because the thing is, like with freelancing, you might spend extra time on things like QuickBooks, like you're running your own business. Well, no one's paying you for those hours. Mm-hmm. So you have to include that in your hourly rate. And I actually do a lot of project-based rather than doing it hourly, because I've had issues of clients not paying me. If I just did it hourly and I bill at the end of the month and they don't pay me, I don't make any of that. So if you do it project-based, I always figure out, exactly what the client wants before I build like an Excel spreadsheet saying I really lay everything out. Like I'm giving you this many CADs and this many views and this many colorways. And then I do it project based and I have them do a 50% deposit. So, and then I start working. Like I don't even touch a project unless I get 50% down anymore. So you at least know, and that leads into like, how do you know where your next paycheck's coming from? Like you at least know you have 50%. And then it makes you work harder too. It makes you like stay on schedule. It makes you like deliver it quicker because you want to make the client happy. You've already set your schedule. Like I set up a timeline in there. And then more, and you're not waiting for a paycheck anymore either, because sometimes people pay late, people go on vacation, people aren't super organized. But at least what you're going to be making those next like 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And then I would say like stay at your job and save up 6 months of expenses. My husband and I have like 6 months expenses just like tucked away. That's liquid, that just in case one of us loses our job. But I would do that before you actually go into freelancing, because you're going to have some awesome months where you're going to work so much. And then you're going to have some not so awesome months where maybe like, one project gets pushed back. So instead of freaking out how to pay your rent or your mortgage, you already have that like tucked away, and you don't need to take on projects that are maybe not ideal for you. Maybe you're making less. Like you don't want to take on work that's not a good fit for you. And that could be, you're not making your proper hourly rate, or maybe it's like a field that you know nothing about and you're just taking it on to make the money. Like the client's not going to be happy. You're going to be freaking out. Like it's good to like test your knowledge, maybe one step at a time, but don't like take a huge jump into like, I would never try to design gowns, just give me all the activewear. I love activewear, but that's what I stick to. Yeah.
Okay. So I have 2 questions based off of that. So when you're doing, and I'm in the same boat as you, I always do project based. So when you're doing project based, one of the things I see designers really struggle with is how to come up with that number, how to know what that project should cost. And you don't have
I
to
just break it all down.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, so like say if it's a women's capsule collection, so I'll do one top, one bottom, one jacket, one bra. Well, I know how long it takes me in Illustrator to do that. I know how long it takes me to research for it. I know how long, a tech pack takes me. And maybe this is more because I've been doing it for 6 years, freelancing for 6 years. You can kind of gauge how many hours it's going to take you. And then I just multiply it by the hours.
Like by the hourly rate that you want to earn. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you have to make sure it makes sense for you. Like, and now for me, I have to pay for preschool and my self-employment tax and all those other things. So you have to make sure that it's actually worth it to work, I guess.
And that perhaps took some time to learn how to not over or underestimate what the project really entailed, to do your proper research and discovery with your client to figure out exactly what was included, also to correctly include that in the proposal, and make sure that scope creep didn't happen, which is where your client starts asking for more and more things that weren't really included, but you just keep doing them. And then putting a correct estimate on, well, I don't know, I think a tech pack is going to take me an hour, but then in reality, maybe it takes you 3 hours. So did you get burned a couple times at the beginning and learn your lessons where you're like, this took me 3 times as long?
Right. Yeah. And I still do. Like if I take on a project that's a little outside, my wheelhouse, it might take me a little longer. Like I just did a duffel bag. And I hadn't done a soft good accessory in a while. So it took me a little longer, but I mean, when it's a project based and you're doing like 4 or 5 different things, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's kind of bound to happen. You're not going to know everything, and maybe being okay with that. And really start tracking your time too. There's all those time tracker apps, and it keeps you focused, and you can like figure out how long it does actually take you to do the CAD. And how long does it take you to spec garment, things like that.
Yeah.
So just adding all that up.
And those are things you could start tracking at your full-time job. Just say like, I'm going to make some notes about how long this task takes me. So then when you go to freelance and you're bidding a project of that caliber, you're like, okay, well, I know it takes me 2 hours for this, and you have a good reference. So those are things you could maybe do to plan ahead. Yeah.
And then to touch upon your, what'd you call it? Scope creep?
Yeah, scope creep. Have you heard that term before?
No.
So
but
it's just where, I give you a proposal. I say I'm going to do this, this, and this, A, B, and C. And then I say I'm going to do 3 CADs, and I'm going to do front and back view, just to keep it really simple. And the next thing you know, your client's asking for like 8 revisions. And we really want this to be long sleeve, not short sleeve. And they just ask for all these things. And sometimes they're little and they happen really slowly. But the next thing you know, it grew into this monster. And the scope of the project creeped out of what it was intentionally supposed to be. And and since you're charging by project, that can be a scary space, because that's where, at least, I mean, have you had that happen, and how have you dealt with it?
Yeah. So when I first started, that would happen a lot. But now at the bottom of the proposal, I say anything not outlined in this project proposal. And I try to be super detailed, exactly what they're getting. I even put in like 1 revision now, or 1 to 3. I kind of talk it through with them. Sometimes they're so detailed, sometimes they're to give me like hand sketches that I know it's not going to be too much back and forth. But if I know it's going, if they don't have a good vision, then I know it's going to be probably 2 or 3 revisions. I might include that in there, and I'll just tack it on to the project price. So I can kind of gauge beforehand. Or you can write it in there like, if you need any revisions, they'll be billed at your hourly rate. Or, anything not outlined in this proposal will be billed at my hourly rate. And I get questions all the time like, well, what does that mean? And I'm like, okay, well, you're asking for 2 tank tops. If you ask me to do a headband or a bra, that's going to be billed at the hourly rate. Or we go back and do another project. I'm totally fine working on project, but everything needs to be nailed down beforehand, or else, you'll get screwed.
And so have you had some of those moments where you're like, all of a sudden they send you an email and they're asking for like 5 or 10 things and it's not included in the proposal? And how does that have you had to have that conversation?
Yeah. I'm like, oh, okay, I can totally do this, but this isn't outlined in the project proposal. We've never discussed this before. It's either going to be billed at an hourly rate and I try to always give them like the option, or it'll be this much project fee.
Yeah.
So just like I don't like being told no, they don't like being told, no, this is the only way. I try to always give some options.
Yeah.
So even with sourcing, I do a lot of sourcing for clients. I always try to give a few different options for a fabric or a button or a factory. because, you don't know what's going to be in stock. Like you just always need a few options.
Yeah. I feel like, and I've had those conversations too where I have to pick up the phone. I'm like, hey, you're asking for 8 rounds of changes and we really only included 3. And it can feel like a really hard conversation to have. And I think the first couple times you do it, it's awkward. But then it gets to the point, it's like, this is just business. We're just having a business dialogue. Yeah. And this is what it is. And it has to be fair for both parties. And you said it so elegantly, but it's something I know a lot of people struggle with, especially at the beginning, is putting their foot down and saying, no, I can do this, but here's how it has to work either one of these 2 ways.
Right. Like I almost always say yes, but I'm like, this is how I can do it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that. Right. So instead of saying no, just saying, you know what, yes, we can make that happen. Here's your 2 options of how to make it happen.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. Okay, cool. And then the other thing I wanted to talk about, kind of going back to what you said of like, you get 50% down, so that lets you be comfortable for a couple weeks, and then you finish the project, and then you get the next payment. And so there's this idea of like, well, where's my money coming from? So that gets you through, let's say, a couple weeks or maybe through a couple months. But like, do you ever worry or like, and I know you said you do outreach and networking and stuff, and a lot of the clients are just people who you've grown throughout your network over and over, but are you constantly like, maybe constantly is not the right word, but are you actively, when you meet with people, when you cross people's paths, when you connect with them, are you actively saying and reminding them like, hey, I'm available for freelance? Or like, how are you kind of how are you helping them keep you in the back of their head?
Yeah. So I started I send out a monthly newsletter to my current clients and my potential clients. And even some of my vendors I put on the list because I've become like good friends with my vendors. And so once a month I send out an email and I link 5 top articles about our industry. So it could be fabric. It could be, how Lucy was closing all their doors. So-and-so's going public, things like that. I'll link all those articles, and just once a month I do like a touch point, basically like, hey, I'm still here, like, and at the bottom, I'll do like a new picture of my portfolio just to kind of keep things fresh. Like this is what I've been working on. Like I just did a wearable technology project. I worked on it last year, but it just launched this year. So I've been using those images. And then I just got a new client off of LinkedIn last week. So it's keeping in touch, it's how they talk about it in marketing, touch points. But it's not once a week, it's once a month. And then if I go to the trade shows, I used to go to OR and Magic and all that. I just go by and say hi. I'm not pitching them constantly. I'm just like, hey, I'm still here. I'm still doing freelance. I still have my pulse on all the trends and what's going on, and meeting with, sourcing, and I kind of touch base that way too. But it's not constantly, hey, do you need freelance help? Hey, do you need freelance help? Because that's just annoying.
I love the newsletter idea. That's really brilliant.
Yeah.
Because go ahead.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
They look at you like you're an expert.
Yeah.
And so it's showing them that like you're constantly reading up on it, that you are an expert, that you know what you're talking about. Because sometimes you're a lot. When I first started, I was like 25. So I was younger than most of these people that owned the companies, right? And so like, who are you? Why do I need to pay your hourly rate? I just want to pay you $20 an hour. And you're like, no, that's not what you're going to pay me. I'm worth X. So the more knowledgeable you are, then like you can stand behind your hourly rate or your project rate, because that you know what you're talking about, basically. And they don't always understand that because they might be new to the industry, or they might be new to that section of the industry. But yeah, so it's like constantly proving your worth, I guess is a better way to say it.
No, that's great. So. And the other way I look at it, like the first thing I thought when you said that you send them these 5 really relevant articles is not only are you showing that you're an expert and that you're keeping up with what's going on in the industry, you're providing them value because they may, this month, this past week, whatever timeline, they may have just slipped on keeping up on some of the news. Like, as we all know, it's like information overload out there, so it's hard to keep up on everything. So you can be that conduit where, like, I'm going to deliver this stuff on a silver platter to you, and I'm just going to give you these great articles. I think these are things you should know about. So it's delivering them great value. So I want to, because I want to step back and really look at this from, like, if I am in a full-time job and I want to go freelance, okay, like, the newsletter is a great idea, but, like, you said that you include current and past clients as well as potential clients or prospects, would be the best word, that you want to work with, that you haven't worked with yet, and some vendors on there. Are you just, like, where are you finding these potential clients, these prospects, and how are you adding them to your quote-unquote email list? And if I didn't have any clients to start with, like, how could I maybe think about doing something along these lines?
Yeah. I mean, I've just created this list over the years. Like, I've never actually paid for any sort of SEO or Google AdWords or anything like that. My website used to show up on the first page of Google because I created an active lifestyle consultant website, almost 10 years ago. Like, I set it up a long time ago. So a lot of them have found me, but just when I go to trade shows too, I'll meet people. I pitch a lot at trade shows. Oh man, OR is intense. I have to, like, always psych myself up. Like, I'm, like, stretching in the entryway, and people are like, because I'll go with my vendor friends, and they're like, what are you doing? And I'm like, well, now I have to walk up to, like, 10 different booths today, and they have no idea who I am, and they think they don't need my help, but I have to convince them that I can help their brand. So it's like selling to stores, but it's selling yourself to the owner of the company, or maybe the designer, or whoever it might be. And then, I just keep in touch with them that way. But reaching out, if you can't go to the actual shows because OR gets expensive to go to, I would do LinkedIn. I've never paid for that premium LinkedIn, but, that's an easy way to do it. It's just so expensive. But you can, like, reach out to, owners of companies. I mean, you can just blind contact them on, from their website and see, how you can get in that way. Yeah. But yeah, it's just like selling to stores. It's getting to talk to the right person, explaining why you're different, and explaining how you can help them. Really. So
can you give me your 3 to 5 sentence pitch that you would give if you were at OR? And if you need to do a little stretching in the background, I have this great visual image of you. It reminds me of Alec Baldwin from 30 Rock, if you're familiar with that episode. He's psyching himself up in the mirror, and he's doing this little, like, game dance. It's amazing.
Yeah. No, I totally do that.
But if you could give me your 3 to 5 sentence pitch, whether you're doing it in person or whether you're doing it in writing, like, what are you saying to these people?
Yeah. So usually, okay, let's hold on. I try to, like, understand the brand at first, right? It's not like I'm walking up to a brand and I don't know anything about them. Like MPG Sport. Okay, let's go to them. I've never actually worked for them, but back when I was with K Active, with Carrie Walsh's line, she knew someone who worked there. So we went out one night at a trade show. So this is like 8-9 years ago. So this is like the one guy that I know at that brand. And yes, I follow all these brands on Instagram, and, like, I know who their new, celebrity endorser is. And, like, you need some talking points. So yeah, I guess talking points.
Do your research.
Do your research. Like, what's their new collection right now? Maybe have something in mind on, like, what to say about it. But yeah, so you just go in. Oh my God, I totally remember doing this to the owner of MPG at OR last year. And I'm like, hey, does Blaze still work here? I think that was his name. And he's like, who? He's like, no, he hasn't. Oh no, Bill Blazer. He's like, no, he hasn't worked here in so long. And I'm like, oh, really? Like, I hung out with him at the OR show, back when I was with Carrie Walsh and blah, blah, blah. And so you get him talking, And then he's like, oh, cool. And he's like, why are you in my booth? And then you have to say, like, oh, so now I'm freelance designing. You know, I'm no longer in-house. I work from home. And I was wondering if you guys need any freelance help. You know, I see this awesome new collection. Like, are you guys just going to stick with women's? You know, are you guys going to launch any outerwear next season? Kind of getting them to talk about their brand and figure out like what their pain points are. Like what could they go into next? You know, what do they need help with? Like maybe their designer just left, maybe someone's on mat leave. Trying to figure out how you can help them. And so you don't want to just talk about yourself. You know, it's not a job interview when you go pitch people. You know, you always have your resume and your portfolio ready, but you don't need to just like throw that on the counter right away. Cause really you're just like, they're there trying to meet buyers. So you're there trying to provide help for them. Just like, you know, the newsletter I send out. But get them talking and see how you can help them would be and then always leave with like a card, you know, show them your portfolio if they want to see it. Sometimes they want you to come back later, just be flexible. But yeah, I think just like be nice and be personable.
Okay, so I'm going to just sum that up because it was a really good formula. So do your research and have something relevant to talk about that's current with like their brand and what they're currently doing. Let them know that you're doing freelance, and then ask them a bunch of questions about their brand and maybe directions. Have they thought about doing this? Or have you thought about doing that? And then from there, you're going to have to wing the conversation to see how it goes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's awesome. You can like insert yourself into, this is how I can help you.
Yeah. Perfect.
Rather than just blindly, hey, I'm a designer. I'm looking for a job. Yeah. Like they don't want to help you. So, yeah, it's making it more about them than it is about you.
Right. And then once you understand where their needs and, like you said, pain points, which is something I've not heard many designers say. I hear that a lot in the business and marketing world. You seem to have a pretty good side of the brain that thinks a lot about that stuff, though.
Yeah, because you constantly, like, that's how they're going to sell it to their buyer.
Right.
So maybe it's from having my own brand, but you're constantly thinking about, you know, how are you going to stand out in the store? And, you know, what the customer is going to end up wearing it to.
Yeah. So. I love it. Okay. This has been so much fun, Marissa. I really, really appreciate your time. I have one last question that I ask everybody at the end of the interview. And it is, what is one question that you wish people would ask you about working in fashion but never do?
Ooh. I have no idea.
Okay, let me give you here would be my answer.
Okay.
So I think a lot of people think working in fashion, like working as a designer, like we just frolic in fabric all day and like pretty colors,
I was
right?
Just thinking about
and
that.
Like I'm so much more fascinated, not so much more, but I'm so fascinated as well with the whole I'm actually really fascinated with the technical and the engineering side of things and like how to turn two-dimensional items into three-dimensional things that fit on a body. And so, but no one ever talks about that or like the process of actually sourcing and manufacturing and managing that whole process. So I don't know if I just stole your answer. We can cut my answer out and then you can just answer now.
No. So my thing is working in fashion is awesome and it has its perks. But it's just like every other job. There's parts of it that nobody wants to do. I mean, well, some people like accounting, but I hate accounting. I hate having to like chase payments. I don't want to be in QuickBooks every single day. But in order to run your business, you need to take care of the business side too. So I don't know, probably half of it is creative and the other half of it is measuring in Excel. So it's just like almost every other job. Like, we're all just doing data entry and I'm not just playing with colors and fabric, although that's what I show you on Instagram. Those are just the fun pieces of it. But yeah, I spend a lot of time just on the computer tracking everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, it just drives me crazy. Oh, my job is so boring. or like, oh, I wished I worked in design. And it's like, well, only half of my job is creative. The other half of it is how to get it done, basically.
And can be super tedious.
Yeah. And just as boring as the boring part of your job, like everyone has an exciting part of their job and everyone has a boring part of their job. And it's like focus on the exciting, like the part that you love.
Yeah.
Rather than complaining about the bad part.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Okay, Marissa, where can people find you?
Yeah, so my website is marissaborelli.com.
Okay.
And that's MARISSABORELLI.com.
Awesome.
And on Instagram the same, and
we'll put
Snapchat. I think I'm on Snapchat.
Yeah? Are you Snapchatting?
I think, yeah, kind of.
Awesome. I will link to all of that in the show notes. And then, is there anything you're currently working on that you'd like to share with everyone?
I just got back from a week in Taiwan, and I was there with a client, and we're doing seamless running apparel. And I'm so excited about it because we were at the factories, like at the fiber factories. We were at the yarn factories. We were at the seamless factories. I mean, it was such an amazing experience being in Taiwan and seeing all that. And now I'm back home and doing all the tech packs and the design for it. So that should be out probably next year. And then wearable technology. That's like the hot new thing too that I've been loving doing. So.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you chatting with me today.
Thanks, Heidi.
Thank you for listening to episode 4 of the Successful Fashion Designer podcast. If you'd like to learn more about any of the resources mentioned in this episode, visit the show notes at sfdnetwork.com/4. And since you made it this far, you must have liked the episode. If you can take 60 seconds to leave a review on iTunes, it helps the show a lot and makes the podcast easier for people to discover. It's super easy to do, and I'd really appreciate it. Visit sfdnetwork.com/review to leave your rating, and thanks for your support and help.